Good morning, everyone. My name is Devin. Today we're going to talk about using the Timesheets program as well as the online employee self-service portal. It's meant to be a very casual class, so please don't be shy about asking questions as they come up. I can actually see everyone today, so you can literally punch up your little hand if you want, or I'm never offended if people just start speaking. To start, I'm going to show you what it's like to get into the desktop version. Now, the use of this will depend on if you have access to a networked computer here that's on the city network. So I know some some employees work in outside buildings that don't necessarily have PCs that are part of the network here. For those employees, the only way that they'll be able to access the timesheets is going to be through the online employee self-service portal. And the one caveat is if you're someone that's responsible for approving an employee's time, you must do it through the desktop version. So currently, it might mean that Morgan has to do some of the entry for people and then the approvals, but the goal ultimately is to get the IT infrastructure set up so that you can remotely access this program as well from wherever it is that people are working. And as far as getting logged into it, on your desktop, there'll be a folder that says Equalizer.net Applications. If you open that, this will show all of the products from BS&A software that are installed on your workstation. So this laptop, lots of programs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need all of them. The only one we're really conscientious about today is Timesheets.net. Just to say it again, Timesheets.net. I know a lot of people think when they're going to go enter their time, oh, I'm doing my payroll. No, payroll is for Morgan. So Timesheets is for everyone else. Yes?
Can we just also say that you can also
yeah.
So you don't have to go to Equalizer.
Yeah, a personal choice. You could go through and pin it to your desktop here if you wanted to. Just depends on if you know how to do it and take the time for it. But once you get to it, when you go to the login screen, if you've ever logged into another BS&A program, your username and password is the exact same. If it's your first time accessing a BS&A program, we likely created your username to be the exact same as your Windows name. So whatever you use to log onto your computer would be the same thing. There were a few exceptions to that where it looked like they had been longer term users of BS&A before that had happened. So there are a couple of exceptions, but those are, again, the same people that are already used to logging in, so they'll know who they are. If there's ever any confusion, though, we do have the ability to look up and see more specifically what your username is. And if there is an issue with your password, we have a couple of people that have the capability of resetting it if needed. But
I'm sorry, I just would like to add that the password doesn't change right here, though, because our Windows passwords change every 60 days. So if you set them up with a Windows password at that time,
it should be. Yeah, it should be blank initially when it's created. All we did was say to use your user ID. So the first time you'll log in, your password will be completely blank, and then there's a section you'll go to in order to actually set up a password. So I already have myself logged in, so I'm going to pounce in here as the BS&A test. But if it is your first time coming in and you do need to set up your password, inside the program setup application view, this white box in the top left kind of directs the main part of the screen that you see. In the third tab here that says My Settings, there is a Change My Password choice. So if it was initially nothing, you would leave the current as completely blank, and then you would go to the new and you would set up whatever password you want. We generally recommend that you make it a few characters, a mix of numbers and letters, so there's some complexity to it, and we always tell people you should not share your username and password with anyone else. One thing to keep in mind is these programs do have a very strict audit trail on them. We keep track of the user ID, who's done what, down to the minute. It's not that we want to big brother anyone, it's just mostly if there's something that's done erroneously, we want to know where did that originate from and how do we coach someone towards making the correct choices in the future. But as far as once you log into the timesheet program, the employees that you have the ability to view should be specifically assigned to you. So you should see yourself, and then if you are someone that is responsible for multiple other employees' time, either entry or approval, you should see all of those people as well, no more, no less. One way to look and see who all you do have access to, there is this table of employees. This will show every employee that you personally, that your user ID has the ability to access. So being who I am, I gave myself access to everyone. But if I was the police chief, let's say, I would expect to log in and see myself and then everyone in the police department, and likely that would be all the employees that I would see, mostly because those are the only ones I'm responsible for. From this employees table, if you were trying to navigate to employee records, you can double click on any of the names in here and it will take you to the timesheet view, which is where all the data entry is actually done. It's also one of the locations where we would be able to go through and do the approval process. So that's one method of navigating from one record to another. Another choice, there are these search links. So it's kind of like a hyperlink almost. When you click on this green link that says last name, you could type in the last name of whatever employee you're looking for, and then it would take you to their record. If you're someone that is function key oriented and you don't like to use the mouse very often, F6 will also bring up that same search feature. You'll type in their name, and then to the record you go. As far as doing the data entry for it, it's fairly simplistic. One thing I do want you to always please try and check, because we know it's just human nature. No one seems to put it in daily as much as we ask for them to do it. It seems more often than not, the period of time goes on, and it's the Monday that payrolls due that everyone's like, oh, let me put in my hours. I got to get them in now so they can get approved and we can get paid. You need to be very conscientious that when you log in, the system will put you into the timesheet that includes the current date. So if it's that Monday after the payroll that you're putting it in, you need to navigate back to the previous timesheet. That way you don't do all of your data entry in the period that just started and then get no hours for the period that you really wanted to do the entry for. So inevitably someone will do it once. You only ever do it once when you realize the mistake you've made though. So in here, we do list the dates for the entire period that you're doing the entry here. It's also listed up in this section. And in order to go through and change the period of time you want displayed, you just use this calendar on the left-hand side. And choosing any date in that pay period will adjust the view screen in order to give you the timesheet for that pay period as well. In the event that you do accidentally put in everything for the new period when it should have been the last, there is this choice you can go to that says reset to default. It basically will wipe the whole sheet out so you don't have to manually remove every individual hour you put in. But again, that still doesn't fix the issue of you have to re-enter the whole 2-week period, and we have that kind of timing deadline we need to meet in order to get the hours entered and fully approved, because those are the steps necessary in order for Morgan to then be able to go through and actually process the payroll. So once we are on the correct period for the timesheet though, the entry, you simply will line up the pay code that you're going to use along with the specific day that you want to put in hours. If you click into the cell once like this and it's kind of dark blue, usually I tell people, think of the dark blue as like if you saw the cursor flashing and you started typing, that's exactly where those things would go. So if I type the number 8 to put in 8 hours, it automatically brings open the window. It says that that's where I'm putting in those hours for entry. It's optional to include notes if you wanted to, and then you can hit close. Those hours are then recorded. So if you're kind of quick with the keyboard, you can really go through there fairly quickly. It's just 8, enter, enter, 8, enter, enter. It moves left to right. But you really just need to be conscientious of which coding that you're putting it to, because some of these will have adjusted premiums. I know we have some shift differentials that people are going to be receiving. On those setups, we've taken your base rate and we've included the differential. So instead of me having to put 8 regular hours plus 8 hours of premium at whatever the change difference is, you can just put 8 hours on one line. It includes your regular rate plus the premium now. So we've tried to be a little as explicit as possible with the titling of those so that people know exactly where to put them. Outside of that, the sheet will give you totals per row that you've entered, and the bottom will give us hours per type. So let me throw in a couple of overtime hours on here as well. What it's going to do then is give you per day your totals and then a grand total for the sheet overall. So my typical thing that I tell people is, especially when you have to spread your hours amongst multiple codes throughout a period, if you're used to working a full period of time and you're either 40 hours a week or 80 hours in a bi-weekly period, after you've done all of your entry, just do the double check to make sure, does my total come to what it ought to? And as long as it does, it'll make the processes afterwards of getting the approval and then the entry to Morgan done that much quicker so that payroll can get processed that much sooner, which is our goal. Outside of that, if you need to go through and change hours after you put them in, instead of hitting the X over here, that'll take out the entire row. We would tell you to just click back on the cell, type the 0, and it will remove those hours, and then they're off the sheet. So it's fairly easy to make your corrections. You have the entire period. We encourage people, if you can, to do these daily or at least weekly, because it seems like our memory is a little stronger about what we were doing and when. So if you put in hours even in advance, if you said, well, I know I'm going to work regular hours, I'm not taking any time off, you certainly can go through and preload those, and then after the time period is done, if you needed to make adjustments, that's a choice as well. Really, it's just they need to be entered and so that they can be fully approved Monday mornings. That way payroll can then begin their processing. In here, you have some additional abilities to look at other items. One of which is leave balances. So that leave balances button is up here in this secondary toolbar. It will go through and show for each of the banks that someone has what the hours are that are available to them. There is a limitation in the system so that things like this where we have a negative aren't allowed anymore. Basically, if I've got 5 hours of vacation and I try to record 8, it's going to pop up a window saying, okay, 5 minus 8 equals -3, no go, you're not allowed to do it. So just keep that in mind. That is something that it'll go through and look at. But we have adjusted your pay stubs to include those leave balances on there. It's going to be accessible in the online employee self-service portal that I'll show you in a moment as well. So we kind of put it all over the place now just to, A, make sure everyone's more aware of what their hours are, but then it should reduce those questions of where did the hours go? Once the sheet is fully completed, the approvers can go through and do the entry. It doesn't send any type of electronic notification saying, hey, Devin finished his timesheet, can my boss go through and do the approval? So really, we mostly come to the agreement of recognizing a time deadline. Most of the time we say, by like 10 a.m. Monday mornings, we want all entry done so that between like 10 and noon, we can get all of our approvals completed. That way Morgan's not waiting indefinitely in limbo in order to go through and be able to actually start her payroll processing. So with that in mind, you'll have to remember if you are responsible for approving that you independently do need to log in. It's not going to prompt you or remind you to log in. If necessary, we always encourage people to put recurring calendar reminders on their own Outlook calendar if you're using that, just so that if it is something that you're not used to doing, it'll kind of help to prompt you and send that notification along of, hey, I should go through and do this. And in order to do the approval processes, it's also fairly simple. There's 2 methods to go through. I have a preference of one, but truly the choice is up to you. So the first choice, if you are capable of approving the timesheet, there is this approval status button that will appear to you. So if you are a person that only gets to enter your own time and you don't approve your sheet, this approval status button will not be accessible. You won't even see it there. The people that do the approvals, though, once you click on it, it's going to go through and show, okay, this Mickey Mouse works in the police department. And the 2 levels it needs to go through is a departmental approval, which we put a couple of people that are capable of approving the timesheets for that department in there. And then the secondary, the final approval it goes to is for payroll. There's 2 purposes to that. One is that for some groups, Morgan does have to go through and do the approval since they're not using the system fully yet. The secondary is that we always want to make sure that if things really get into a dire situation where no one at the department level can do the approvals, then Morgan still can process the payroll. So she's listed here at the payroll level in order to do the secondary, and she can essentially skip the first if absolutely necessary, but it is explicitly expected that at the department level you review those timesheets after the fact and then notify her if there are any corrections that need to be made. Our goal is that she be mostly transactional. She's processing the hours since she's not directly supervising anyone. So the accuracy of those really does fall back into the departmental levels to make sure that what was paid really is what transpired at the employee level. So that's a lot of talking for me to say. Normally, you'll click on approval, and then at the bottom it says, choose an action to take. You would go through and say, approve these records, hit apply, and it moves from unapproved to approved. You're essentially done with that one single employee. Now, normally I would encourage people to do these one person at a time. The reason for it is in this view, it lays out the time that they've worked in a calendar format. So visually, to me, it makes the most sense. I can conceptualize like, oh, okay, the 11th was a Monday. It is normal to work 8 hours there. The other additional reason, like if we were going to ever have any notes in here, it gives a little asterisk to kind of indicate that there is notation, and there's some reporting capabilities based on those notes if and when you choose to use them. So for those reasons, I generally like it, and those are just a couple of items that the alternative way I'm about to show you to do approvals does not have those included. So the alternative method for approving time, up in the tasks here, it's going to say you can mass approve deny timesheets. When we click on this, the first time you come in here, it's going to initially say, do it for a selected date range, which you certainly can type in the date range if you want. I just don't have the pay periods here memorized, so I use the alternative of saying doing it for a pay period, because it'll autofill the dates for me. And in doing so, you would click OK, and this will then give you a list of all employees you have access to approve that have hours that have been entered. So here we can go through and see my Mickey Mouse. I had done the approval, and then I changed it by putting in those notes, so it's showing in a partially approved status. This is a secondary way, even if you do approve them one at a time, you can check your work. But if you were coming here and you wanted to do the approvals, when you select a single employee on the top part of the list, the bottom part of this screen will give you the finer details of what has happened on that specific timesheet. So Mickey up here, Mickey down here, I can see the approval history that's happened, but the more specific part you'd be seeing at your first level in the department, this would typically be blank. There are no approvals until you've done them. The secondary tab will just simply show the different pay codes they've used and the total number of hours associated. And then the third will show which days and the number of hours that have been entered. So it does have the same amount of detail, just to me it's visually a lot easier to conceptualize when I see it in this format back here, like a calendar instead. So could be a personal flaw, but the main thing you would do, if you're comfortable doing the approvals here, if you double click on the line, it'll update this approval status. Or you can select an entire grouping of employees if you wanted to. If you're going to say, my entire department, I've looked at all of their hours, nothing seems outlandish, I agree that these are correct. You can highlight the whole group, and I did that just simply by clicking on the first record, holding that click and dragging the mouse down. You would then go to this update selected rows, say set them all to be approved, and then you hit save changes. The approvals would be done at that point. So 2 methods, it's just preferential mostly that I have people go through and approve them individually first. And then even if you wanted to do this to check your work, because if I had done my approvals here saying, yes, these are all correct, but I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally miss anyone because I'm doing them one at a time, you could still load that mass approve deny screen with the expectation that you go through and see approved by with your username there. That way you know you covered all of your people. Now, if you are going to the employee records one at a time, an additional way to go from one record to the next, you can use these up and down arrows here, or you can use the page up and page down on your keyboard. Now that is different than arrow up and arrow down, because I have had plenty of people get a little confusion with that. So the page up and page down buttons, or arrow up and arrow down, this will simply go to the next employee record that you have based on how the table of employees is sorted. So ideally, I tell people to go through and sort their department of people alphabetically by double-clicking on the header that says last name, mostly because then it gives you the predictability of if I start at Adams and I know the next employee is going to be Beck, you can consistently guess where it is you're going through those sheets. And it seems like for most things when we're reviewing stuff, we're used to going in an alphabetical order anyway. So once you sort this table by double-clicking on that header of last name, it'll remember that sort for you going forward on that workstation. So you shouldn't have to consistently resort it every single time. But really, there's multiple ways to get to the same endpoint. Again, our goal is mostly just that the hours are entered as accurately as possible and that our approvals are done so that we can get the processing completed. The other couple of additional things that are seldom used in here but are worth explaining just because it could be a question later on. Since we are doing a lot of these things electronically and there is not a physical paper timesheet that a lot of employees will use, if we did need to get the hours detail for an employee for some reason, if they're asking for it, if you click on the pay period breakdown button up here, this will allow you to generate a report for the period of time that's displayed currently for that specific employee. So it will autofill the start and end date to be that entire pay period. You would go through and say, okay. And then this would show me the specific pay codes I used and then how I recorded the hours in that 2-week span. So it's not often I see people needing this or asking for it, but in the event that someone does say, hey, I'm used to having this paper, where's the backup for it? That's another way to get it. The items in here, they'll never be deleted. There's no such thing as a purge out of the system. So a year from now, you'll be able to come back in here by using this calendar in the left-hand side, and you can pull up the former timesheets if you really need to get a printout or clarification about how hours were worked. Now, the alternative things that are in here is a leave calendar as well. So I'm going to throw on a couple of personal hours. Ignore that it's letting me go below level. It's just because of who I am. But the reason that I'm showing this There's another application view called Leave Calendar. This is just for a single employee, but it will go through and show when that one employee is using their different types of leave time. So if you hover over it, it'll tell you the specific number. There's no ability to stack multiple employees. It's not a scheduling tool that anyone can use to say, may I request time off? Those processes stay the same as they always have been. It's just the ability so you can visually see in a month period of time, how is an employee using their different types of leave time. So I used to joke with people like, oh, if Mickey Mouse was taking like every other Monday off, he must have had rough weekends all the time or something along those lines. So he just really likes 3-day weekends. So that's the only piece that the leave calendar also includes there. Does anyone have any questions about the desktop version of it? Is there anything that you want me to repeat again or to show one more time?
I think the only thing I brought up a good question today is to tell people, especially when we have more of the employees in the past with the shift premium. And in the description period, when you're selecting which hours you work, those are like the shift commencing during that time, not meaning that you worked those hours. So for instance, in his, 5 p.m. later, if someone has a schedule of working 8 to 6, they don't need to put an hour in the 5 p.m. later and get that premium. That's just commencing. So I already have this that question, and I thought that was a good thing maybe to explain.
Okay, excellent, yeah.
Is that or just put in there, so.
We might be able to go through and try and fit that more. We'll see. Because we can definitely look at that more this afternoon, I think. Anybody else?
Are we going to have this all on our computers today?
It's a great question for your IT. That's not me. If it's installed, yes. If not, we'll have to find out some type of course of action.
They should be able to access it through the web, though, even if it's not a desktop.
So that'll be the secondary piece. So even if you don't get the desktop version installed, later on today we will send out your employee self-service registration emails, and that will include your access to enter the timesheet there. So maybe not necessarily the desktop version, but by the end of today we will send out the registration so you can enter it online. Which perfectly segues into the next section we needed to talk about anyway. So later today, there should have been an email address that we have on your employee record, and what you'll receive is going to be an invitation. It's going to come from online support at bsasoftware.com. Please check your junk and spam folders. It often gets flagged that way because it has language in there that says, please click on the link below, and it's your first time receiving that email. So often that just says, wow, it's a foreign sender, and it's got directions in here that are a little suspicious. But it's a one-time use email. You'll click on the blue link that's in there. Do not create your own account. Don't go online and sign up for yourself. We'll send you the email. But once you click on it, it will open a web browser for you, and it will direct you to bsaonline.com, and there will be a button you'll click on that says Activate Account. Once you've done that, it'll let you log in from that screen, but I'm also going to show you the way you'll log in every time after that first activation as well. And then you can delete that email. So in the future, anytime you need to go through and pull this site up, you can do it from a mobile phone or from a desktop, laptop. The one thing you'll have to keep in mind if you do it from a smartphone, a lot of times we have the mobile version of a website instead of the full site version. In order to access all the features I'm going to show you, if you're doing it from a cell phone, you'll have to scroll to the bottom, and there'll be a link that will just say View Full Site. It'll be right in the center of the screen all the way at the bottom, and then it will adjust and give you the links that we're going to look at. But from any web browser, you'll be able to log into, and you would go to bsaonline.com. Of course, I'm already logged in, so it's going to look a little funky, but so this is the screen. You would go up to the top right, currently not signed in, and click on Sign In. It'll take you to the login screen. Now, your username will be your full email address that we sent you the invitation to. So for Morgan, for example, hers is mhustick@cityofstclair.com. For whatever email address you receive that invitation, though, that is what it will be. And your password will be your last name followed by the last 4 digits of your social security number. So that's the default way that we send it out to everyone. And then afterwards, you would simply click sign in. And then once you're at the login page, it will display, City of St. Clair up here, St. Clair County, Michigan, and you will have these blue links on the left-hand side. That's what's related to the employee self-service portion. So if we start, what you will normally be able to start with is the My Timesheet. That's kind of the same activity as the desktop version that I just showed. There's a live link between the two. So as soon as we enter online, it will show up in the desktop version, vice versa as well. If I was to put it in the desktop and I access my online sheet, I would see it there. The caveat, approvals cannot be done online. You have to do those in the desktop version. So just to reiterate that piece.
Since our IT does not put the vehicle information on the desktop for the time being out there, they are more than welcome to
Yep, absolutely.
And even if the department has been approved, it won't be on the desktop version, I can still process the payroll until.
Mhm. Yep, it just means you'll have to do the approval and like supersede the department one, but yeah, you have that capability. Okay, so I'm on this My Timesheet view. It's meant to be laid out and kind of look exactly like the desktop version. So same function of activity of lining up the specific day that you've worked along with the pay code. You'll enter in the number of hours, any applicable notes, and hit save. Once you've done that here, it'll immediately have that same hours entered and accessible inside of the timesheet version. The one thing that is a slight difference here as far as looking at the leave balances, there's still a button that you'll click on, but it will change the view screen that you're on, whereas the other one just popped open a window that hovered over the timesheet to show you the hours you had available. So this one, you click on leave balances, it'll still show individual banks and what the balances are. To go back to the timesheet, you need to click on Timesheet View, and then that will adjust you back to being able to put in the hours that you'd like. But other than that, the rest of the functionality is exactly the same. If you are logging in on that Monday after the payroll period is done and you need to put in your hours, you'll need to use this back and forward arrow in order to adjust. Similar to in the desktop version, we were going to use that calendar. So either one, as long as you're on the correct period, again, is all I want to say. The right period is where we wanted to add. But other than that, the timesheet entry functionality would be the exact same. So these other 4 links is what we're going to talk about next. These are the online employee self-service tools. There's a live link as well between your personnel record that is maintained by Morgan and then this online resource that you guys have in order to pull up your information. So right now, this is going to show basic things about, where do you live, how do we contact you. If we needed to make updates to those records, there are these request to change buttons. When we click on these, it's going to display the different data fields that you can alter. Anything with a pink star is a requirement. So in this case, if the employee had gone through and changed their phone number, they would overwrite and then type in new phone. You hit submit, and while that is a pending change for Morgan's review, it'll be shaded in pink. But within a few seconds, there's a notification that will come into the payroll system saying employee this wants to make this update. Do you say yes or no, basically? She'll say yes or no, and then once she's done so, this goes back to a white shaded background. That's how you'll know that your request has been accepted. So that request to change functionality, it's going to exist in quite a few places across the board here. There are going to be a couple of additional locations where we'll have not only the ability to request a change, but we'll also link a document that you may need to fill out as well. So I'll explain those specific ones that come up as we get to them. But the rest of this on this first tab of general here just displays basic employee date information. And if you click to expand the pay information, it'll show if your biweekly, weekly, hourly salary, and then what your hourly rate of pay is or your base salary amount. And the idea, is if someone's nosy over my shoulder and they see me log in, they don't need to necessarily know the rates that I'm getting paid. So Dependents in here, I know plenty of you probably do have dependents. This is not necessarily directly tied to, let's say, the insurance plans that people have set up here. So please, when you log in and see this, don't be alarmed if you're not seeing dependents on your record. With the way that the city currently has their health insurance set up, it's not a requirement that we have the dependents in the system. So you don't necessarily need to worry about immediately updating this and throwing the dependents in there. If the way that the health insurance is managed, if that ever changes and they're needed, there'll be communication we would send out to you saying, please add that additional detail, as well as probably some more formal insurance documents that would include it as well. But the functionality would be the same. You would click add, fill out the pink stars, hit submit, and then it would go into the employee record. Emergency contacts, when we were looking at the records, we saw plenty of people that didn't have these. One thing I've noticed that's super nice is St. Clair is very community-oriented. You all seem to know each other fairly well and probably know who to call when there is an emergency. But just to make sure we have a more formal location, we usually encourage people at least once a year update this or review who's on their records so that if someone has to access it that maybe doesn't know your personal details, we know who to call in the event that there is an issue. You can have multiple people on here, so I know that depending on the person, sometimes people may not be immediately from the area, and I may not have, direct family or a spouse here. Maybe they're, somewhere farther away. So you can put on multiple contacts if needed. The functionality is exactly the same. Click add, pink stars, submit, you're done. Benefit plans, because you guys don't have our HR program, this won't actually show up on your version of it, so we're going to skip over that one. But requests, the reason why we can forego getting a paper document for a lot of these changes and they can just be accepted electronically is that we have an audit trail to keep track of who wants to make which update to their employee records. So these requests keep track of everything that's been submitted through the employee portal. So for example, that phone number change that I put in today, we can see that it's pending because no one has accepted or denied it yet. But if we were to look in the details, it'll actually show what it is that I wanted to change that is waiting, in theory, for Morgan to go through and approve. And then if for some reason I realize I erroneously put in that request change, you could still withdraw it. So everyone makes typos every now and again. But this is how you could take it out. It removes it from her queue before she would even be aware you'd ever submitted it. And then you could just go back to the initial data that you were trying to update and do it again. And then the last section for this personal employment info is just employee documents. This is an optional resource that can be used within the payroll program, but there's one section that has documents here. There's another section here that has the same documents duplicated along with several other categories that could be used. So the idea, especially if you think back to how when COVID started and everyone had to work remotely, not everyone had networked access to a lot of things that were being held at the municipal level. So through the payroll program, there's the ability to link attachments in different categories and then have them published so that they're viewable online. It can be as narrow as I'm attaching just to the employee record, so only this one employee will see it, but it can be as broad as everyone in the city would go through and see these items. Just depends on the location that we go to upload them. So if we look at employer, for example, this would be where we would see everything that everyone in the city would be able to see. And some basic examples of things we would put there would be like an employee handbook, any policy items that we might want people to have access to. But then all of these categories in between have that same capability. So at the bargaining unit level for our unions, if we wanted a copy of the union contract in there, we could have it uploaded as a PDF. And then every employee that's enrolled in that union through our program would have access to it. So not a requirement that we use it, but it is something that can be useful. It is only able to be entered through the payroll program. So at the department level, if this was ever a resource you were going to want to use and there were documents that you wanted shared, they'd have to be shared with Morgan, and she would upload them under the department then, so everyone within your group would have access to it. So after that, though, the main reason outside the timesheet that people come to this online portal is to pull their pay stubs. So the personal financial info link over here, it's going to have a few tabs. The first one is going to include check history. So my play database here is not well maintained. We can see I've only got 2 payments from 2018, but the gist of it will be the same. It's going to show the payment ID, so your direct deposit number. It's going to show the pay date, your gross and your net. The first time you log in on a workstation, you'll want to check this box that says display it as a PDF. And the reason for that is, regardless if you turn it on or not, when you click View Check, it's going to open a separate web page in order to display the PDF of that stub. And I've noticed that some web browsers, if you don't say use it as PDF, it'll do this unusual web alignment where things are not straight across and it looks a little funky then. So this makes sure that it's wrapped up nice and tight as if I had received that printed actual pay stub. But from here, if you're someone that actually does want to print it out, you simply would right-click, hit print, hit save as if you wanted to just put it into a file. BS&A, again, we don't delete or purge ever, so any check history we have will be accessible in here indefinitely to you as long as you continue to be an employee at the city. It just means that eventually there'll be multiple pages that you'll cycle through here in order to go back in time to look at previous checks. But most recent checks are always going to be on top, and then historic ones will cycle through in sequential order based on check date below that. Direct deposit on here, so everyone's on direct deposit, which is great. If you want to make a change to direct deposit, keep in mind that there's testing we have to do, so we really need to know before the Monday of pay week, at least a couple of days in advance, if you want to make a change. Morgan has to go through and submit a file saying employee X wants to try and use this account. We need the city's bank to go through and test, yes, it's an acceptable account to use. So we will have linked for you the direct deposit form. You'll fill it out just as you always have. Please try and give us the canceled check or the bank letter if you can. I mean, some people have beautiful handwriting and that's great, but everyone can transpose a number every now and again. The last thing anyone wants is payday to hit and then their money is not in their bank account and everyone's saying, where's it at? So that'll be there. It's just going to be a form that, again, you'll print out and actually, like in person, submit essentially for Morgan to receive it. It does not have that request to change feature. But the basics on here, it's going to go through and show the account that you have. For you guys, it'll show an actual routing number, the last four of the account, and then the method. For pretty much everyone, it's just CheckNet. All of it goes into a single place. But there is the ability to have a couple of them if you wanted, let's say, $100 to go to savings and the rest to go to checking. There is that capability. It'll just show the way that that money is being portioned out. Tax and W-4, so for the federal and state taxes, this is going to be a kind of a two-item process in order to change these items. So if I wanted to update the way that my taxes are being calculated and withheld, you're going to, one, request the change and then load in the data that's related to the W-4 that you're going to fill out. But we also link for you the federal W-4 form because for Morgan to accept that change, she legally has to have this in her hands, signed and dated, not predated, but current date for her to accept those changes from the employee. So each time you want to change your withholding status, you'll click on this little link here. It's going to open the fillable form. So especially people like me, my handwriting's not lovely, so you can go through and type in whatever you want. The main thing is you'll fill out your calculations, and then you have to actually sign and date this before she can accept the change. And then the last one on here is going to be W-2s. So W-2s, to be very explicit, will always be printed and distributed in-house by the end of January. The online version is an unofficial, non-legal copy of what it could be, but the reason for it being unofficial and non-legal is online. We don't have your social security number stored anywhere, so A, you'll never be able to like print this out and take it to a tax preparer because it just says her name and how many John Smiths could there be. But then B, because a lot of times our different governments will track certain things for the employees outside of payroll, we need until the end of January to often update the employee record to include that information on the W-2. So I say that to caution people that they don't want to January 1st of the year log in and say, I use TurboTax Online, I'm just going to pull the numbers from this even though it's not the official copy, because those values could change. So until you get the physical one, don't take this to be for gospel, basically, is what I'm saying. Unlike when you went through to click on the check and it displayed it in a separate page and you could print it out, in this case, if you tried to go through and print this, it's intentional, it does this. It's a web print, so it includes all of this background information too. We don't want you to take this to an accountant or a tax professional and have them try and do your taxes. We want you to get the real one. Additionally, another reason it's not available online, we're supposed to give it to you on perforated paper with instructions on the back. So for all of those reasons, again, I'm going to say it will come from Morgan, not online. But starting with the year 2021 and then all subsequent years, those values will be visually displayed online. It's just if you needed a copy because you lost them for some reason, you would still go to Morgan and say, can you please give me a copy of the 2021 W-2 values? So that's it for the financial. Hopefully I said it enough. Not online for the W-2. Year-to-date is going to show you calendar year-to-date, what's happened on the employee record. So in the future, you'll have 2021, and going forward, if the year's 2025, you'll have this drop-down, and you'll be able to choose any of the previous years that you've actually been an employee and had transacted values here. But it's broken into 6 different tabs. The first is just going to show each of the pay codes that we use in order to describe how you're getting paid, and then the gross dollar value that we have associated with it. When we click on the view details, it's going to automatically have these checkboxes turned on to say, hey, hide any paychecks essentially that did not use this pay code. So I can see the one paycheck that I used overtime was March 18th or March 19th. If I click on view check, then it'll open that separate web page. I'll be able to see the stub and then how my entire pay period was described. If I really wanted to go back in time and verify it, you can use that timesheet link, go back to the previous periods, and then you can see the full timesheet too. So it's just kind of a nifty tool to give you the ability to go through and look at it, especially if you're looking through and saying, like, I don't remember when I've done X item. That way it'll help you itemize and pinpoint when in time you actually did make a transaction happen. Now, deductions are just all of the things we're withholding from your paycheck. So it's going to show your taxes. Those of you that are in retirement schemes or on insurance or have union dues of sorts, all of those items will be detailed for you on here. And the functionality is exactly the same. When you click on the details, it's going to automatically show you just the paycheck or checks in which that specific item type was used. Now, hours will display the same pay codes as the payment screen. It's just the number of hours associated regardless of the gross dollars attributed to them. So it's mostly informational only. These are hours that have been paid, not hours that might have been accrued, let's say. So that we'll kind of get to when we get to leave balances. So the third location I mentioned before, so we put the leave balance activity available to you at the timesheet entry point. It's going to be on the pay stub. This third spot here will actually let you see the running transactions of when did I earn and when did I use hours, let's say, throughout the year. So when we look at these different banks and we click on the details, it's going to have these different transaction indicators here. And when you click on one of them, you can see very faintly the shading is slightly different. So if I click on used for under my vacation, it's going to update the bottom of this screen to show me the specific paycheck in which I actually used that type of hour. If I wanted to see when I earned them, again, I can click on it and see, oh, I earned hours on both of these paychecks here. So our goal is full transparency to make sure that all of that information is available to people at their fingertips. That way, again, the question goes away of where's the time gone? And then the last couple of sections of this, taxable gross is just going to show for each of your applicable tax types what the gross dollar value is that's attributed to it. Now, it'll be my simplistic setup here shows them all being identical. Don't be alarmed when you log in and see like federal and state being different. It's very normal. We often have pre-tax deductions that people will have as part of their employee benefits. So things like retirement contributions on occasion or health insurance will be considered removed from earnings before taxes are calculated. So if that part's ever been confusing, like when you look at the W-2 stub and you see, in box 1, you're like, how is this my income? Look a couple more to the side. That's really the larger number. And then the last one on here, direct deposit, is just going to show the net dollars we've direct deposited into your account. Now, typically this is year to date. For the year 2021, because we did a data conversion, it wasn't something that was able to be converted. So it's going to have a much smaller number than the actual dollars that have gone into your bank since January of this year. So this 1 year only, it's going to be a little bit different. But if you picture in 2022, what you'd be able to do essentially is look at my total amount of payments and my total earnings. You could then remove all of your deductions that we've withheld from your paycheck. The difference of that would end up being your net dollars that have been direct deposited to your account. So the goal is really just full transparency so that employees are fully aware of what we're doing on their record. And in all honesty, we want you to look and check, because if there's something that you're questioning, we want you to let us know, and we're happy to talk about why things are the way that they are, or it might make us want to review and maybe change some things, maybe if we notice an error, let's say. So the sooner you look and the more often you check, the better everyone is from it. But that is essentially it for the online self-service portal. You all stayed awake, which is great, so thank you. What questions do you have?
So a supervisor can go in on a Monday and approve for the previous week. Do they still have to make sure that?
Only when they're doing that approval, if they're doing it one at a time, once you adjust the calendar view here, it'll put you onto that previous period, and then all subsequent employee records you look at will be on that same period. If you're doing the route where it's mass approve, you just really have to make sure the date range you either enter or the pay period range you have selected here is the appropriate range of time.
Because after midnight on Sunday, it's going to go to the next.
Yeah, it's tied to your Windows date. So like on the 13th when I log in, it's going to throw me on whatever timesheet includes the 13th. So as soon as this changes, once you log into the program, that's when it will adjust. Well, and that's fairly common. There are a lot of places that, because you don't know the finality of what's going to be until the period's over, that a lot of people won't put it in. So we get that that's kind of the human nature of it. As much as I want people to put it in daily, I know that A, it's a little bit of time to go through and do the entry, but then B, because there could be variability to it, no one wants to put it in to have to correct it and then put it in again, right? So I know that a lot of people realistically will wait. Totally fine. There's no like system anger that's going to happen if you do it on that Monday afterwards. It's just mostly the caveat of making sure you're on the right date, because visually they look so similar that people don't question it ever. And they're just like, oh, I'm putting in the time. So that's why I just try to say over and over, like, please check the dates that are listed on here.
For like a Sunday midnight shift. If they were,
7 to 7, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday, because it, you know, that
So-
crosses over pay period. What is
That's really your guys' policy about how that works. So, because ours is not a time clock, we don't actually record entry and exit times for work, it's just hours entry. So if someone did that, would you normally record it for the period that's currently ending, or would those hours actually get separated between the two?
See, I'm thinking that they would put in at 7 p.m. on Sunday, 12 hours.
that? And get paid, put that in Sunday pay, not
Right.
Monday.
Right.
You know that? Like, for, like, the police, the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, the Sunday, they will cut off. So technically Monday starts at midnight, but they're in one shift. They still get 12 hours on Sunday. Yeah, things
No,
kinda-
that is a-
that was gonna.
No, that is a fair question, because because before all we've been doing is just been working off the existing sheets and just put in the hours. So I don't think we've never had to actually ponder that ourselves yet.
Water department, they literally put like, a lot.
Eventually you'll realize it's fairly intuitive. It's mostly, today these classes I sometimes feel silly because it's mostly me talking for things, so you could have clicked through and be like, sure, okay. So, but just to cover the questions and make sure everyone's on the same page so that on the start, because like on Monday, I'll be back again with Morgan, we want to process payroll using timesheets.
So when is the email?
So I think our last class is scheduled to be done around 2:30, so we'll probably send out emails a little after 2:30 to all people. Is that not it? Oh, even better then. Okay. Nope, that's totally fine. That's my fault for also just looking at the initial schedule they published like months ago, so who knows? But even better, I only have to talk twice now. So yeah, so you'll get them, we'll send them out then before we go to lunch then. That way you can get them sooner. And if you're not finding them, we leave at 4, but if you can please try and look and tell everyone else that you interact with to also check. If you're not getting it and seeing it, please come and either call or just come over and let us know. I can resend them, and if worst case scenario, because some people do have very good junk and spam filters where it just like obliterates them, I can do a manual confirmation for you and then make sure you can log in with me. So,
And they'll also do
And then the link through the email takes you to the website.
mhm.
Is there a way to desktop that website? Or-
I'm going to say yes, but I'm not very technical in that. I know I've seen people save a shortcut for it on their desktop before. I just don't know how to get that done.
Right.
Yeah, you can bookmark it, but you can also. Exactly, that's why I even mentioned, so we don't have to go to that equalizer.net, you know, it's
Right.
like you can just put it right on your desktop, and it'll go right to it. Well, these some glitches, should be there. I'm waiting for Tom to tell me, you know. I feel like everything went super smooth. I just want someone to tell me, yes, I see it in my account, just so I can, you know, calm down. It's there. It came out of our bank, you know, the file went through, so it's like, it's there. Right? You know, that's all. But no, this is gonna be,
Um,
but even like the pay stubs, if there's something, you know, when you look at the pay stubs and there's something you want to see differently, that used to be on there, that's not now.
There's a lot of flexibility with it. So, and some of the additional things too that, I mean, I usually don't touch on them because generally it's not relevant now, but going forward, one thing to keep in mind too, now that we're putting into a program, is the reporting capabilities are going to be much more expanded now. So again, like if we needed stuff by date or if we need stuff historical about how time was spent, those will be things that are capable now. And you guys all have, anyone that can log into timesheets has the full capability to run any of the reporting that's available in there. You can't hurt a single thing running a report. All it does is just pull from data. It doesn't generate new data. So that's where, especially like getting into touch with like the notes and stuff, sometimes, you know, we have like single wage lines that we're recording things, but if there's specific projects we're working on and we want another way to identify when we're working on it or who all is working on something, there's the ability to source through those notes. And as long as we're consistent about putting them in there, there's some reports we can use to say, well, only show me when I worked on project 1, 2, 3, 4, if that's the identifier that we're going to use. So I know it's a lot of times, you know, because it's never been accessible before, no one's really thought, how could I use that? But that is something that going forward, you'll be able to get a lot more out of it. I kind of always, you know, preach this whole, like, as much data as you put in, it's as much data as you can get back out. So the more you put in, the more reporting capabilities you get from it. No, we create it. They don't create anything. We create it.
Or to log in.
Oh, you have to have it, yes. You have to activate the account, but do not create your own, because then I have to delete you, and then that takes me time.
I mean, you have to activate your account, the email that they'll send. That is how you will get your stuff.
And that link is only good for 7 days. So that's also why we want to be especially sensitive about making sure we're letting me know on the next, either today or Monday or Tuesday if it's not been accessible.
What do they do?
There's a resend link that she can go through. Morgan has the ability to resend it out. It's just ideally we want them as soon as possible because I would like to see that the list is at 0 before I go, just to know that there are no lingering issues. But the support staff in my office can also assist with that afterwards. I usually am a little more effective if it's in person. That's it for me then, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.